morning, media houses and those joining us via the stream. Welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing. It is said the backbone of any democracy is an independent, professional, and responsible media. And you can't do your jobs unless you have access to the information. And that is what we're giving you here, the access. Today, the press secretary will give an overview of the courtesy calls the acting Prime Minister facilitated this week, as well as an update on Prime Minister Davis's travels. Please welcome him as he comes to introduce the presenters today.
Thank you, Jillian. Good morning to all of you colleagues. Good morning again. It's great to see all of you back here for another week. We're into the holiday season, so happy holidays to all of you. And thank you, Jillian, for introducing. Most of you colleagues would already know Jillian. And those who don't, Jillian has joined us this week as one of our press officers. We have Italia Clark, who's also a press officer here. And we're building out our technical team with Chevron Roll, Bruno Pratt, and so we're excited about the expansion of our team as we try to serve you a bit better. So thank you again, Jillian. You'll see more of them as they try to service your needs and ensure that you get the information that you need. Like Jillian alluded to, we have some information to give to you today, and of course some important information we believe that you should have concerning a number of areas of concern. We're going to begin obviously with environment because we believe it's very important, particularly a big concern for the Davis-Cooper administration, something that we are focusing and zeroing in on keenly to ensure that we protect and we preserve, but also we provide access to where there's necessity. And of course, coming to make a presentation is the Director of Environmental Planning and Protection, Rochelle Newbold, to talk to us a little bit about an important area so that you're aware of it. So I'm going to invite Director Newbold to come to the podium and to address us this morning.
Good morning. Last time when I was here, we had an opportunity to present to the Bahamian people the reasons why we were at that time making our way to Scotland to attend the Glasgow COP Summit. I want to talk about some of the outcomes that came that by way of our participation in that, and then I also want to bring to the attention of the Bahamian people the issues with regards to the state of our coral reefs and the actions which are going to be undertaken. And then I want to talk a little bit about scientific research and how that's being done within the country. Now, as it relates to the COP26 and our participation at that meeting, everybody is quite starkly aware of the Prime Minister's performance and the accolades and the recognition that he brought to the country by virtue of our presentation there. But I want to also bring to you the technical issues that revolved around that conference, one being that we were there to discuss the issues of climate change and its impact on the global environment, the state of the planet, the livelihoods of all people, and particularly those associated with island nations. The reports that came out from the scientific communities with regards to climate change show that we are well on our way to a 2.7% rise in temperatures. And with that temperature, that global temperature change, what that means for countries such as ours is one that I want to make sure you have a keen understanding with. And so I arranged for there to be a presentation, a visual presentation, because I think that really conveys a lot more, much better than I would be able to convey by words. The next slide, please. So one of the areas that most Bahamians are most familiar with, as well as any person traveling the world, is the issue of Atlantis. And we've catapulted Atlantis into the international community's consciousness. And so this is Atlantis present day. Next slide, please. This represents a 1.1 degree rise. What happens here with sea surface temperatures, global temperatures, this is an unavoidable sea level rise. This is what we will be experiencing as we speak. Could we go back to the first slide? Because I don't think people can necessarily appreciate what I'm showing you here. Keep your eyes on this bay as well as this area here. Present day, next slide. 1.1. So you see a significant moving in of the sea level into the inland communities. This is what we are going to be faced with. There is no going back. This is our today, which also means that areas in and around Atlantis, in and around the Bahamas, and we're just using this as an example so that you can get a framework, a clear understanding of what's happening there. Those developments that are being proposed along the coastline, those of us who have homes along the coastlines, this is the scenario that we are going to face. And we as a people need to be making those adjustments. We cannot continue to do what we did before because the planet is not how it was before. The next slide, please. This is a 1.5 Celsius degree rise. This is what we have been fighting to avoid. Here again, when you look, that bay is totally gone. So is this bay, as well as the infrastructure that's here is already submerged and underwater. This is what we're trying to avoid within the next 2040. If the scenarios regarding climate change and greenhouse gas emissions do not get abated, if we do not immediately enact a 50% change in our GHG emissions, and when I say we, I'm talking about the planet as a whole, particularly the G20 countries, this is our present scenario. Next slide, please. This is a 2-degree rise. Oh, everything now is underwater. Next slide, please. This is a 3-degree rise. And I mean, we're gone. This is not Venice. We're not going to be using gondolas to get around. This infrastructure was not put in place to address this sort of a change. With this 2 to 3 degree rise, the scenarios we're looking at is by 80 years from now. And a lot of us may sit back and be like, well, you know what, I'll be gone in 80 years. That ain't my problem. That's somebody else's problem. But the reality is you will be enjoying the ride all the way there, with substantial increases in hurricanes, the ferocity of those hurricanes, the impacts to the access to fresh water, the decrease in agriculture, the loss of coral reefs. All of these will be the resulting life that we presently living in this country will experience, that of our children and that of our children's children. So when we talk about the fact that it is important for countries such as ours to be at the table when such negotiations are undertaken, that is because somebody needs to remind the world that there are people here who will suffer. And then the final slide I have here. One more. Not that slide, but there was a 4th slide, which will be a 4-degree rise, which is nobody do anything. Every man for himself. And that would mean that the Bahamas is no more. Several islands, including ours, that would mean the Maldives, the Marshall Islands, the Cayman Islands, Tuvalu, we're all gone. Because there will be no way that the population that presently exists, the people known as Bahamians, will have to go and migrate elsewhere on somebody else's property. And we will have to be starting those negotiations now. Because every island nation knows that this is a potential future that they will face. And so they will start to seek those discussions. What I'm saying is, what do a country such as ours, which contributes less than 1%, what is it that we can do to affect this change? We have to be strong and determined people. We have to make sure that our voices are heard. We have to make sure that we are there when others are trying to sugarcoat, ask for more time, be less impactful in the activities that they intend to attempt to address this. We can't afford it. I also say this because the Ministry of Education has advised that we will be going back to a face-to-face method with our students. Our students are ill-prepared for this sort of future because we as parents are ill-prepared for this sort of future. We need to now have our kids look at alternatives in terms of their education and their career choices. Maybe there are technologies, maybe there are engineering schemes, maybe there are new design concepts that we need to be considering as a people, because we cannot continue to think in the same modality and vein that we are now. We have to think differently. We have to be adaptive as a people. That means we have to change. The issues that we are going to face with greenhouse gases is also an issue of, like I said, affecting our education, issues affecting our health. With respect to climate change, we will see more heat-borne disease transmissions, Mosquitoes will be more prevalent, chikungunya and all these things that come because of a tropical climate. These are going to be things that we are going to be facing more and more. There won't be some things that we get a hit and miss, but they're going to be a standard contributor with respect to our healthcare system. We know right now that in Grand Bahama, the RAN hospital is in need of some serious and significant attention. And that means that our infrastructure and how we are going to be able to accommodate and service our people needs to be addressed. This administration is looking at major national project shifts. We're not looking at one or two things, but we are looking at a philosophy and a strategy that impacts this country on a national level. Our educational system, our health system, our agricultural system. When you're looking at scenarios such as this, that means, can your people feed themselves? Right now, we already know that we import more than 90% of the food that we eat. But when countries, say for instance Madagascar, who right now is facing a 5-year drought, when they can no longer feed their people, these issues associated with the climate shifts will affect the major producers, who are going to be their most direct beneficiaries. Their people. Who will be second or tertiary? Will be others. Where will we fall in line with that? I don't know. But what we need to do as a people is to secure things such as our water reserves, meaning what we have left, we need to protect that at all costs, because that's our fallback, that's our plan B, right? When it comes to our food, we need to ensure that we put in place schemes and programs that ensure that we can feed ourselves in the event that there is an issue, in the event that there is a catastrophic disaster that not only impacts us, but impacts our partners to the north or our partners down south. We would need to be resilient as a people to be able to hold our own. We need to start looking internally and making those choices and those decisions that impact or allow us to have a solid future. Without those, we are a lost breed. We will go the way of the dodo birds, right? One of the things that we want to do in order to empower our youth, we are going to be hosting a youth conference next year, summer of 2020. And we're going to be very aggressive as to how we bring our youth into the conversation of what is it that they are going to inherit by bringing them along with us to the table. So as we seek to plan for COP27 and our intro into to Egypt to come, and keep in mind, folks, COP is the final determinant. We've been working since COP26, since we came back. We have been having meetings after meetings after meetings because we did not achieve in a global sense what we wanted to achieve at COP26. But we have to keep the discussions going because we don't have, without multilaterals and bilateral agreements and partnerships, the planet cannot sustain itself. So we have to keep the conversations going. And those conversations will be ongoing until we meet again at that table when we say, this is the final positions that we're going to take. A lot of things happen at that COP where countries made promises, where they instituted programs, where they developed new initiatives. All of these things are good, but are they enough? And that's why the conversations have to continue. As we seek to be aggressive with the involvement of our youth, we're also looking for partners in the private sectors to help fund our youth to be able to participate at COP27. So I'm putting that call out now. Christmas around the corner. Put that on your fiscal private sector corporate list of, okay, this is some of the things that we're going to do. We're going to sponsor a school, a child, or something to be able to participate. And then our emerging plans with the Ministry of Education, not only for the issues of climate change, but for the other two issues that I'm going to talk about now. So I'm going to switch my discussion to the area of our coral reefs. Right now, I spoke about this a little bit at a touch point about there's something going on in the Bahamas called stony coral tissue loss disease, acronym SCTLD. We thought about COVID in 2020. Well, we have a COVID of the sea. And that is affecting our reefs at a rate of 50 meters a day. killing the reef. The reef has fundamentally been tied to the lifeblood of the Bahamas and the Bahamian people. Everybody got a brother, father, uncle, cousin, somebody who in the fishing industry, and the further south you go, the more prominently involved are people with the issues of the fishery and the marine resources. Unfortunately, I have to report to you that that disease has been documented throughout the length of the country. It was first identified in Grand Bahama, where more than 90% of the Grand Bahama corals are devastated. The government of the Bahamas sought to engage a scientific team to go ahead and look at what was going on and try to make recommendations as to how this can be addressed. We know that our neighbor to the south has it from 2014, and what they have done, they have cut out their reefs and put them in their aquariums, because this is how ferocious this disease is. How is this disease transported? By water. It's in water and it's transported by water. What we need to be very cognizant of, and there has been public educational material that has been shared with the fishermen, with the dive operators. We cannot then afford to dive on a sick reef and then seek to go to a healthy reef. Because by virtue of the equipment and the gear that we would have dived with the sick reef, we will now be transporting this to the healthy reef, and now this healthy reef will be starting to decay and to die. There is no known cure, there is no vaccine for it, and scientists are feverishly trying to figure out what it is. Is it a bacteria? Is it a fungus? Is it a virus? We do not know. And so how we are going to treat it, there are several tests that are in operations in terms of trying to treat it, to see if they could stop it. There are some corals that seem to be resilient to it and some that are resistant of it. And how do we then utilize those to try to stem this tide of total reef loss? But keep in mind, reefs function like the forests of the sea. It's not one pine tree that creates a forest. It's a diversity of things. That's what makes it robust and strong. And then the reefs contribute to our fisheries. It contributes to our protection from hurricanes. When those systems collapse, we have no more protection. And then if we have a climate change situation, these things are just going to roll right up on shore. And then we're going to see an increasing devastation beyond that of what we saw with Grand Bahama and Abaco with Dorian. But we'll also see it and feel it economically. When the reefs are lost, all these persons whose base economies were centered around the fisheries, there will be nothing for them to do. Where do they then move into now? Which sector will be able to suddenly take them on? These are the things that I'm talking about when I say we need to educate our kids about options that extend beyond the traditional things that we know about. This also applies to us as the adults, that we may need to see how we can expand, curtail, change the way we are doing things in terms of our careers and our livelihoods. But this coral initiative, so what do we do if we have, and we're seeing such a ravenous thing occurring in the country? And last month we held what was called a coral gene bank workshop. And during that workshop, what the government is seeking to do is, where maybe we can't, because of the fact that we have the largest expanse of marine area in this region, we can't go about cutting up reefs and moving them into aquariums, because we only got one aquarium, and that would be Atlantis. So we're in direct discussions with Atlantis as to how they can be partner with the government as well as other private sector entities, scientists, and donors to help us secure and protect our reefs. The Bahamas is a country that is, it's irrefutably blessed. We are blessed with crystal clear waters, we're blessed with clean air, we're blessed with a lot, but we're also blessed with a unique biodiversity that is occurring from north to south. Our corals are not the same north to south. We have corals that are in Abaco that scientists are saying they could resist these climate change, these sea surface temperatures, because they're just different than those that are down south. And we're talking about a diversity of them, so that we, if we are proper managers of the resources that we have, we can potentially be transporting those things. We can be making the dynamic shifts about what we have and what needs to be put there. Just like those of you who farm and you have your gardens, you know when you have to move your plants around because of it didn't do well in this space in your yard, you move it to another space in your yard, or you get a different species. The same thing holds true. As environmental managers, as the ones who are responsible for these things, it is our duty to be better managers of the resource. So we're looking into that, and we will come back to the Bahamian people and we will advise you why. Because they are the natural resources of the people of the Bahamas. It doesn't belong to Atlantis. It doesn't belong to scientists who come here. It belongs to you. And you need to have an understanding as to those who are responsible for managing it. What are they doing? How are they doing it? And how is it coming along? You're the boss, and you need to know. And if things are changing dramatically, you need to know that too, so that you can then take the necessary steps to make the appropriate changes. So the next thing I want to let you be aware of, the issue of the scientific research and the programs and changes that are going there. In April of this year, the Bahamas government launched a scientific online portal where researchers now have to come through one online system in order to be able to get research permits to do research in the country. So where they would have had to go to 5 different agencies before, they now only have to go to one. And through feedback from some of our the researchers that have used the portal, there has been some changes that have been made that makes the portal more efficient and functionary. And then there are still some additional changes to come. But this all came about through the passage of a Biological and Resource and Traditional Knowledge Act, because a lot of things that have gone out into the international community that came from the Bahamas, we never got the due respect nor a recognition for the fact that it came from us. We were the progenitors of it, and people benefited from it, and we did not. So this act was put in place to ensure that that did not continue. Pharmaceutical companies make a $1.7 trillion profit per year, and a lot of that is focused on what is coming out of the marine environment. We hold the largest expanse of marine environment on this hemisphere. It is our duty then to properly manage that and to manage how access to it is given. That means that when people come in here to the Bahamas and they want to do things, we do not have an objection to people being able to access the resources. What we do want is a right to benefit in a partnership relationship with these individuals, because we can rightly acknowledge that we don't have certain skill sets here, we don't have certain technologies here, and therefore we would need to partner with those who do. But that is also something that needs to be clearly documented and agreed. So, governments change, people change, and research doesn't start and begin in a 36 months or a 12 months period. So when we could come back to the table 5 months from a date when a permit was issued, we still have that clear understanding that there was an agreement that should such and such happen, you were to come back and we would discuss how we would wish to benefit. So the research portal is now in place. The research portal is improving as we go forward and we develop. And I am happy to announce that because of the strides that the Bahamas has made, there are 14 other countries that are looking at what we did to implement into their own country schemes. So we were the forerunners, we were the progenitors, we were in the first set out of the gate, and this isn't the first time. We've been in this position many times before, but we have never been given the recognition that is due us. And I want to say to the Bahamian public that we have been doing our job and we're doing it well, and others now wish to benefit in similar manners such as ours. So it is the onus on us is to continue to improve this product so that it's effectual and effective for all parties concerned. Everything that we have revolves around these 13 major islands, these 700 keys. This is what is the Bahamas. The onus is on us as a people and as an administration to ensure that it is always there for the future generation, so that we do not go the way of the Arawaks and the Lucayans, so that we are always here to be great utilizers, managers, and beneficiaries of what God has given us. So I just wanted to bring that back to you. I also wanted to empower our youth to know that come January, when they return to school, there will be options and ideas and programs. Ask your teachers. While we were at COP, 134 Bahamian children dialed into COP, because at the last minute, I was so impressed with the response that received. We want this. We want our kids there. We want them a part of this change as we move forward. Thank you for your time.
Sure. You mentioned looking at coral disease, are you able to provide any insight into the economic impact that we're already seeing from that?
Well, we're seeing, the coral disease was identified in late 2019, and then the whole of 2020 was a shutdown, meaning that we weren't able to go out there and do a proper assessment. But here we are in 2021, and that information is starting to come in. We know enough to know that we're running out of time. We can lose the corals within 5 to 10 years in the Bahamas, and we need to start taking some action to deal with it. We haven't run the numbers economically as to how that would happen, because we're environment. We got to get the economics people in there to get proper numbers. I don't wish to speak of things where I can really give factual information. So that is something we are looking at moving forward as well, to give those numbers.
Can you provide some insight into which Bahamian islands will likely be the first to experience climate change in the way you showed for Atlantis?
All of us. All of us. Most of the Bahamas is at a 1.5 meter in low-lying areas. All of us will be impacted. That's why, too, it's very disheartening when we seek to always cut down the little bit of hills that we have, because we only just lowering the elevations of the country. We are an island that was uniquely made, right? And the reason that our waters are so clear is because of the geology that we have. But that geology, we need to work in understanding of that. When we're starting to work outside of that, we're putting a pressure on the environment that it cannot bear. So we cannot therefore be surprised when it responds in a way that does not facilitate the needs that we wish to have, right? So we have to work with the environment. Everything everybody does elsewhere does not mean it's appropriate for the Bahamas. And we have to make the proper evaluation in that regard.
You were talking about our susceptibility to sea level rise. CNN reported earlier this week that for the first time recently, Greenland experienced rain at its summit for the first time ever, and scientists weren't expecting that to happen for at least another 70 years. How important now does that make it for us to put a plan of action in place to address these issues of climate change for island nations like the Bahamas?
We are behind the planning stage. Everything is already, like I said, the 1.1 is already here. The 1.5 is already here. And we are on a projection for the 2.7. That's where we're going, 2.7, if these changes aren't made at the global level. Countrywide, that means that we as a people need to start making decisions. We need to start changing the way we are developing, the way we are putting in infrastructure, what can and cannot be allowed. And this is where we as a people need to work together. Individuals have a vision for what they want. They want this here and they want that there. But like I said, if we're not working in tandem with the environment, the infrastructure that you put in could be lost in the next 5 years. You would have spent millions of dollars to put something in. The fallback and how does this resonate with the person in Baintown or Grandstand or living out west or living out east? The global economy, the global financiers are looking at what they're calling climate risk. They're looking at countries where they are thinking that investment in such an area is futile because they're gonna need me to pay out because the hurricane will come and clear this out. If we do not ensure that we can develop and continue to utilize this country in a manner that is sustainable, that's economically feasible, and that's benefit for everybody, then we're going to suffer. Those of you who want to get insurance for your houses, it won't be possible because the amount that will be required for you to do that will be beyond your ability to pay. And then it could become to a point where they just won't insure you. Like my health insurance, you have a pre-existing condition? Oh, I'm sorry, we can't help you. You have a climate risk that's high for the country? Oh, we might not be able to do that either. So these are the things. We are beyond the 8 ball. We need to move forward. Key point, let me just, particular to that, one of the issues is this. By 2030, most car industries will be switching to non-petroleum-based engines. What are we doing? We're buying up those $2,000 cars like hotcakes. In the next 9 years, you won't be able to find parts for those things. And why do you think it's so cheap? Because these industries know we got to offload all this back stock we have. And then we're sitting there thinking we're getting a deal. You're not getting a deal because When you cannot find any parts, what's going to happen? Those cars are going to be littered throughout this island. Our Caribbean sisters have already put in policies and legislations. They're not going to be taking any more of those vehicles. Their populace are already starting to think, okay, listen, we're going to have to put our coppers and dimes together because we're going to need to invest in these type of transportation vehicles because that's the only way we would be able to continue this. We're also looking at our transportation system, making it more resilient, more efficient, more desirable for people to not consider that I need to have my own car. And they be able to rely on that. So when I say big national projects, these are the ways we're looking at dealing with it because not everybody, not all of us, like my mommy always say, all your fingers ain't long the same. Everything is different. We have to create a package that can benefit a swath of Bahamians so all of us can maintain a livelihood that we've become accustomed to with some adjustments, but not so drastic that we feel like some side is benefiting and the others are not. That is the conversation we need to have as a people. We have to partner together. There is no way we can get beyond that if we're thinking it only for ourselves. Because all of us, whether we acknowledge it or not, we're intrinsically linked to one another. We need each other.
Jessica will get our final question for this
No, I'm
segment.
good. Okay, I can take her final question. So you said.
You had your final question.
No, so
We can move on.
the photo.
We need to move on. We need to move on. Because time is going, and I want to move on, and we do have another presentation. I know that was a bit long and comprehensive, but it's important, and we wanted to get it in. I want to move now to, yesterday was World AIDS Day, and that is still a fight that we are engaged in here in the Bahamas. And I know many of you are asking questions about that, and as well as about the new strain that has come out in the COVID-19. And so Dr. Nakia Forbes, who heads up our infectious diseases unit, she's the director of it, she's come to talk to us about World AIDS Day, as well as take any questions you may have with COVID-19. So let's welcome Dr. Nakia Forbes.
Good morning, all, ladies and gentlemen of the press, and those who are joining us by live stream. I'm honored to talk with you today about some of the statistics that our infectious diseases unit is definitely monitoring as it relates to HIV and AIDS. Then I will give you a brief update on the COVID-19 situation in country, and I will talk about the new variant, Omicron, that we've been hearing a lot about, and I will tell you what we know about that so far. So I will start with World AIDS Day. Yesterday, December 1st, was indeed World AIDS Day, and that was the first International Health Day. And what that day is for is really to raise awareness about HIV and AIDS, to stand in solidarity with persons who are living with HIV and AIDS or who are affected by HIV and AIDS, because we've come a long way, but we still have a lot to do in terms of ending stigma and discrimination. And it's also a day to remember the lives of those that we have lost. So here in the Bahamas, the first case of HIV and AIDS was described in 1983. And we have been monitoring that epidemic for about 40 years now. And so here are our latest statistics. At the end of 2020, there were 4,700 persons who were living with HIV in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And we also want to know that we are doing our work well and that new infections are indeed going down. And so it's good to be able to stand here and say that there's been a 53% decline in new infections in just about the last 10 years. And that's the time period 2010 to 2019. And AIDS deaths are also down by a similar amount, and that's by about 52% in that same time frame. There are no cases of mother-to-baby HIV transmission in the year 2020, and indeed in the year 2019 and 2015, there were also no cases of mother-to-baby HIV transmission. Unfortunately, we do still have single cases or cases in the single digits in other years. 1 or 2 babies are still sadly born with HIV because their mothers may not come and get antenatal care early, or because they are not on antiretroviral therapy or opt not to take antiretroviral therapy. And so there is a global strategy to end AIDS. The UNAIDS and the Bahamas as a UN member country are in solidarity with a strategy that we had from 2015. And we had ambitious targets, and that at the end of 2020, we really wanted to diagnose as many persons as possible. And the target set was 90% of persons living with HIV would be diagnosed and knowing their status. And when I say that, if you have HIV infection, you may not feel sick, and you might not know that you have HIV. And so our aim at the end of 2020 was to diagnose 90% of persons living with HIV, get 90% of those on effective antiretroviral treatments that are free of cost in the Bahamas, and to get 90% of them on the gold standard of care, and that is something called having an undetectable viral load. The viral load is essentially copies of the HIV virus. When we send the blood sample through our machine, it's going to be counting copies of the HIV virus. But if the person is on effective therapy, there'll be no copies found, and that's called undetectable. That's a very, very important target, because when someone has an undetectable viral load, they cannot transmit HIV in any shape or form. It can't be transmitted sexually, and it cannot be transmitted mother to baby or in any other way. And the person will live a long, healthy life because their immune system will not be broken down. So when we look at the treatment coverage, we have had an increase in HIV medicine treatment coverage from 2013 by 33%. Unfortunately, this still means that we have a long way to go. 63% of people living with HIV were on antiretroviral therapy at the end of 2020, and 72% of those achieved the gold standard of care called an undetectable viral load. Many countries fell short of the global target, although this was an ambitious target. And we understand when we fall short of targets that what we have to do is reassess the situation and close any gaps. And there are gaps that have caused many of us to not reach these targets. And these gaps are really related to inequalities like stigma and discrimination that make people, especially vulnerable and the most at-risk people, feel like they cannot come in and access testing, get medications, and get on care. Antiretroviral therapies are free in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They have always been free from the beginning of the program through across successive government administrations, and we're very, very grateful. What are we now going to do? The world has a new global strategy. We have even more ambitious targets. By 2025, we aim to get to 95% of persons diagnosed, 95% on antiretroviral therapy, and 95% that are virally suppressed. We recognize that people, especially affected communities, people living with HIV and the most vulnerable people, have to be at the center of this response, and we do have to end stigma and discrimination. Prevention is also a very, very important part of our work. There are multiple strategies to prevent HIV, one of which is the HIV prevention pill that is called PrEP. The Bahamas was the first Caribbean country to roll this out. It too is free of cost. It is a single pill daily for HIV-negative persons who are most at risk for infection and meet eligibility criteria. I'm going to talk briefly about that. So eligible persons include persons who may be in a relationship. One partner is HIV positive, the other is negative. The HIV positive partner does not have a suppressed or undetectable viral load. Persons who are in relationships with multiple persons and not always consistently using condoms. For example, persons who've had a sexually transmitted infection in the last 6 months to a year may benefit from PrEP. Please do see your doctor if you are interested in HIV PrEP. So we do have some work to do. We have made progress, but the premise of the global strategy is that we will not rest on our laurels, but instead focus and do what's needed to end HIV. This year's World AIDS Day theme is ending inequalities, ending AIDS, and ending pandemics. And we can get there. Thank you. Those are my comments on World AIDS Day and where we are in terms of the local situation with HIV and AIDS in the Bahamas. I would like to move on now to a COVID-19 update, a brief update in country. As of November 30th, 2021, there have been a total of 22,802 lab-confirmed COVID-19 cases. And at this time, there are 312 active cases. Hospitalizations are down. There are 23 hospitalized cases and 3 are in the intensive care unit. The average number of daily cases is also down, and that on average is about 11 cases per day. 677 persons have died of COVID-19 in the Bahamas to date, and the percent positivity is 4%, which is under the WHO target of 5%. There are also some travel-related cases, and so travel is a risk of getting COVID and spreading COVID. We are keeping records of that, and that is reported in our daily dashboard. And in the last week, there were 34 travel-related cases, and we are urging Bahamians that if you are traveling, please do take precautions. Please get vaccinated. That's very impactful and will reduce your chance of getting COVID. And please take a multi-layered approach. Please continue to wear masks universally, including if you're going to destinations where mask wearing, universal mask wearing is not mandated, and the other public health measures. It's better to be outdoors rather than indoors if you're eating and have to take off your mask, and avoid gathering in large crowds, and good hand hygiene and those other measures. Please consider testing as a part of your travel. Thank you. And I would like to talk now about the new COVID-19 Omicron variant. This is very, very new, but there are updates in terms of the Infectious Diseases Society updates on Omicron, and I prepared some details of what we know about it so far. So Omicron was classified as a SARS-CoV-2, and that's the virus that causes COVID-19, variant of concern last Friday by the WHO. And what is a variant of concern? These variants have features that may make them more infectious or more deadly or evade vaccines or therapy, is what variants of concerns are. So it's important to say that Omicron is being studied, and much remains to be known about it in terms of what its impact will be at this point. But here is what we do know so far. So in early November, South Africa saw an increase in COVID-19 cases in a province that was near Johannesburg. And it's important to note that they really were very diligent, and they noted clinically some changes in the way some patients were presenting, but also they noted that there was a rapid rise in cases. And cases were very, very low in South Africa at that point. And so they really suspected that something different was going on. It was noticeable. So samples were taken and analyzed, and mutated genes were identified. And then, after finding that there were mutated genes, a whole gene sequencing was done to find out exactly what the strain was. And that was when a novel variant, a new variant, was confirmed. And that was first given the letter and numerical listing of B11529, but it's now been given a name of Omicron. So what is it about this variant that is so concerning? It has a very unusual set of mutations and a large number of mutations. In fact, it's the most mutated strain to date. And there are about 50 mutations accumulated in this strain. And the challenge is that these changes are in places on the gene or the genome which are known to be associated with either resistance to the neutralizing antibodies that can be used to treat COVID-19, or it can be associated with increased transmissibility. However, that is where we know the mutations are on the strain. We don't yet know how that's going to pan out as it relates to how the patients are actually going to be affected. And so scientists are studying that, and there should be information about that in a very, very short period of time. So as of December 1st, 2021, Omicron has been reported in 24 countries, including Australia, Austria, Belgium, Botswana, Brazil, Canada, the Czech Republic, Denmark, France, Germany, Hong Kong, Israel, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Nigeria, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and yesterday in the United States. These cases are in multiple locations and spread, and their being in those multiple locations occurred before the first case was even recognized. So as far as what has been shared by the infectious diseases doctors and specialists in South Africa, what they have seen is a rapid increase in the cases per day. from 300 cases per day to 4,000 cases per day. But there is not yet an increase in hospitalizations. We are not sure yet what the clinical picture of the virus is or if it is more severe, but some breakthrough infections are occurring among vaccinated individuals. Among the young, the symptoms have been mostly mild, and currently South Africa has about a 35% vaccine coverage. They have plenty vaccine available, but have lamented that the uptake is low. And so that is what we know about Omicron so far. In light of all of this, we do have to use this time to prepare because it appears as if this can be very rapidly spread and lead to a surge, is what we know so far. So what can we do? We can increase vaccination rates. It's very likely that vaccinations will still have some effect against this variant and protect from hospitalizations and death. Please remember to use layered prevention strategies. Mask wearing alone cuts the risk of COVID incidence by 53%. And when it's combined with vaccination and following the public health measures and social distancing, it can reduce the chance of transmitting COVID a lot. Testing, do consider testing. Holiday gatherings are coming up. Please consider being vaccinated. If you are gathering outdoors is better than indoors. Please remember to use your mask and the public health precautions. There is a suggestion that testing can be used around these holiday gatherings. If you're having vulnerable people at home, for example, if you're having a group, you might consider if you want to do some rapid testing before the date of the gathering. Stay home if you're sick, and there is a travel risk, as I said, so please weigh the need to travel and remember to follow the public health measures when you are abroad. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give you those updates, and I'll take any questions that you may have.
Dr. Forbes, I would assume that given the lockdowns we had over the past couple of years and the national reference labs focus on COVID-19 testing, that testing for HIV and AIDS could have been impacted. Do you have any statistics or information indicating whether there was a notable decline in people going and getting tested for HIV over the past 2 years or so?
That's a great question. So when we had the outbreak, March 2020, and the difficult year that we had, we did continue to provide HIV treatment care and other options. In fact, our offices, our clinics stayed open throughout those lockdowns. The good thing was that treatment did not decline significantly. We were able to keep just about the same number of people on treatment, but testing did decline by about 55% in the year in the year 2020. We are now making steps to expand testing, and there are testing opportunities. For example, we had several campaigns leading up to World AIDS Day. There's free HIV testing through the government system, through our center and the National Reference Lab. There are other options that people can get testing through the Public Hospitals Authority and the clinics, for example, or at your private doctor's offices. And we are in the process of working to validate the HIV self-testing, which is something that is needed. And in theory, it has been supported across the Caribbean and in the Bahamas. It does require a validation step, and we are looking at how it can be validated and look at the acceptability and accuracy for patients and how they're linked to care. We hope that we'll be able to announce that that's available soon.
Considering the emergence of the Omicron variant, are you of the belief that the country should reintroduce PCR testing?
That's a great question. And so we do have to consider that COVID-19 strains, they are introduced through travel. And the truth of the matter is that countries can put in place mechanisms, for example, travel restrictions from certain countries, and it can buy you time in the face of something like the Omicron, which we suspect is going to be highly transmissible. And you can put in place strategies. You could put in place PCR strategies. You could put in place testing strategies that have a smaller window, for example, before travel. You will see that some locations are putting in strategies to travel a day before. And you could consider quarantine also. You could also consider things like travel, testing after travel in an attempt to get these, to detect these cases early. The reality of the situation is that usually by the time it's noted that there is a variant, It has already started to travel and has been in multiple locations. We're going to have to keep a close eye on that, but it is a good idea to look at our travel protocols and tighten that up. And so we are indeed reviewing those and trying to strengthen them at this time.
We have persons traveling for Thanksgiving, would have just had that, and now we know some persons will be traveling for Christmas during the holiday period. Is that something you would recommend now, considering that there's so much unknown about this new variant?
Now, that is an additional cause for concern. So what's clear is that COVID can't be eliminated. At the beginning of the outbreak in early 2020, scientists had hoped that this could go away like the other coronavirus strains, like the first SARS and like MERS coronavirus. But it is very evident that COVID is here to stay, basically, and that as long as COVID is spreading anywhere, that there are going to be mutations. And so we do have to learn to live with it. Now, things change. Now that we know about this new strain, and it appears to be very infectious, or at least based upon what we know anecdotally so far, it can cause a surge. It's causing a surge in South Africa. I do think that it would be prudent to use caution. If you are immunocompromised, older, if you have health risks, I would really say to you, really weigh your need to travel at this time. And if you do have to travel, do take those precautions.
Sorry, Kyle, and then Lauren.
I had a question too that was cut off again.
Pardon?
I have a question too.
All right, go ahead, Kyle, then Francesca, then Lorenzia.
Okay.
Let's go down the order. Let's go Kyle first, then Francesca, then Lorenzia.
Dr. Forbes, just touching on what you mentioned, restrictions. Former Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands recommended that we cut the discrimination between vaccinated and unvaccinated. He said perhaps PCR tests for everyone entering the homes. Is that a recommendation from health officials, or do you think that's a good idea?
Well, testing does provide you an opportunity to screen and try and reduce travel-related cases. In view of Omicron, it is a good idea to introduce PCR testing in the meantime, and probably to introduce testing closer to the travel date. There is a benefit of rapid antigen testing. It's not entirely to be discarded, to be honest with you. So there are pros and cons. However, it is probably most likely to pick up a case if you have a large problem, if you're in a large outbreak, or if the person is symptomatic. It is not the best test for travel, but it is a balancing act. It is cost effective. It is fast. It doesn't require lab expertise. And again, none of these testing strategies are 100%. They will still miss some cases, and so you do have to use travel, some other guidelines. Do not travel if you're sick, for example. If you know you've come in contact, then put yourself in quarantine. But it is a measure that can add additional safety.
My question is, with the new variant, when will, I guess, health experts see if it is successful, if it's able to hold up against the current vaccines that we have in the country? When will we know how well it will hold up?
The WHO and other scientists are studying that, and they promise us we'll have that information very soon. I would think that in a few weeks we should have that information. But like I said, there is something we have to do. So it's important when we have information. Information is great, but you have to know how to interpret it, and what do you do? If you are not vaccinated, please take the opportunity to get vaccinated at this time. Even with these emerging strains of variants of concern like Delta, Alpha, there is likely going to be a benefit from the current vaccines. So what do we know? The persons that have had Omicron so far, even if they have had breakthrough, they appear to have mild symptoms. That is much better than being in hospital and dying. We don't know that Omicron is mild. When you have an outbreak of a new variant, who gets sick versus younger people? Because older people tend to shield themselves away, knowing that they're somewhat vulnerable. And so it doesn't mean that Omicron is going to be mild, even though we're hearing about that. So we do have to be careful. Use the time to get vaccinated. Please do. And booster doses. Booster doses are going to get to be very important. If you're immunocompromised, that means you have a medical problem, any medical problem that is going to weaken your immune system. Do take the opportunity to get a booster or an additional dose when they become available, which we're working on. Some of those conditions you may want to know: diabetes, high blood pressure, lupus, a connective tissue disease, you're on steroids, you have rheumatoid arthritis, HIV, kidney disease, you're carrying a little bit of extra weight. If you're older, your immune system is not as robust as if you're younger. If you have lung disease, for example, if you have asthma, if you have cancer, those are some of the reasons why you should get a booster when they come out. Scientists are also going to be looking at boosters that are specified toward the Omicron variant. Don't wait for that. Please take this time to protect yourself.
That was a part of my question. I noticed that certain countries, especially the UK, they're giving booster shots to protect, I guess, give an extra layer of protection against this new variant. I know here the boosters, they said, will be offered to those who are immunocompromised. Is this a recommendation, or is this something that we're looking to give booster shots for anyone who wants to have them as an extra layer of protection against this variant, rather than just those who are immunocompromised?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so each country is in a unique situation, and this is our situation in the Bahamas. Vaccine coverage is about 40%, roughly about 40%. However, when we rolled out our vaccination platform, that was some time ago. That started in mid-March, right? So it's been more than 6 months since some persons got their first dose. And that's just around the period when what we can measure, antibody levels, but immunity is more than antibody levels. Let me first say that. But antibody levels will start to wane, and that's a good time for people to start to get their boosters. Now, remember that we still have a large proportion of people who are not vaccinated at all. 60% of people are not vaccinated at all, notwithstanding eligibility like age criteria and so on. And so what do we know will help globally with this whole COVID-19 situation? Better vaccination coverage. Because these variants happen in scenarios where people are immunocompromised and have COVID for long periods of time, and the outbreak is continuing. So if COVID is spreading anywhere, many people can get sick. And the setup for variants is immunocompromised people. For example, it's been put forward that maybe this variant started in somebody who had a weak immune system, and there are documentations of people who've had a weak immune system that can have COVID test positive for 200 days. And so the virus can adapt and change. So what do we do? If the world needs to get out of this, we have to have better vaccination coverage. We've got to balance vaccinating as many people as possible, but also looking at protecting those that are most vulnerable and the booster doses. So we will have to do a balancing act with that. We do need boosters. When we look at our hospitalization data at Princess Margaret, for example, we know that those who got breakthrough cases of COVID, we know that they were older, that they had medical problems, and certainly those that passed away, despite their vaccination status, there were few. They were older and had a weak immune system. So we do need to use boosters. Boosters do not mean that COVID vaccines do not work. There are many vaccines where we give multiple doses. There are childhood vaccines that we boost. Children get their measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine while they're very small, but then they get several other doses while they're in childhood. The flu vaccine itself is something that we give regularly. And the aim is that we keep people out of hospital and save lives.
Just add on the question, for persons who had the AstraZeneca vaccine, there hasn't been much of that needs a booster. Would you recommend that you have a little cocktail with the vaccine?
Yes, so AstraZeneca also needs to be boosted, and it is okay to mix them and give the Pfizer, for example. And there is even some scientific information that suggests that if you mix them, that you would have a more robust antibody response.
What about Johnson & Johnson that's about to expire? Can we use that as a booster for those of us who want to take it?
So Johnson & Johnson, actually, there's already a Food and Drug Administration in the United States recommendation that if you had Johnson & Johnson as the first dose, that you would benefit from getting a second dose within 2 months. And that is something that we can also look at. We are trying to put the platforms in place for support of additional doses now.
Talking about the Johnson & Johnson booster dose for persons after 2 months, I know you're looking at the immunocompromised right now, but specifically those persons in the Bahamas that would have gotten Johnson & Johnson, will they be eligible for that booster shot sooner?
There is a across-the-board recommendation for Johnson & Johnson. It's the FDA. It's an indication that you will benefit from a second dose 2 months after the first dose, across the board. Across the board. We're reviewing that now and trying to update the platform. So we hope to have an update on that soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
You're most welcome.
Oh, our pleasure. Dr. Q, for that. I know today's press conference has been very heavy laden information, and I apologize for those who it's really a lot, but we had to get all of this information out to you today. I'm going to move real quick with the announcements, and then we can wrap this up. We have our special food business that we're highlighting today as well, and of course, Ms. Cleopatra Christie from the Crisis Center, where we want to put focus on the white ribbon. So I'll do that real quick so that we can get through before we're at the top of the hour already. Just a couple of announcements I wanted to get through. And of course, you know, on Monday, Education Minister Gladys Hanna-Martin became acting Prime Minister as Mr. Davis left the country for the week on a number of business and personal matters. Deputy Prime Minister is in Europe on business. And then number 3, which is the Foreign Affairs Minister, Fred Mitchell, is out of town. Therefore, number 4, Mrs. Hanna-Martin assumed the role as acting Prime Minister. And of course, many people may have wondered how that selection works. The cabinet is in order of seniority. So you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. And that's how Ms. Hanna-Martin became acting Prime Minister, because she was number 4. And of course, we considered it an honor to have worked with her this past week. She continued to carry on Prime Minister's engagements, meeting with courtesy calls, and also this morning receiving the national security briefing as well. The Prime Minister returns on Sunday morning to the country. We met this week, the acting Prime Minister, with the German ambassador to the Bahamas from the Federal Republic of Germany, Dr. Stefan Kiel. He paid a courtesy call on the acting Prime Minister on Wednesday morning before leaving the country to Jamaica, where he is stationed. Dr. Kiel said next week Germany will have a new government that will be made up of 3 of the political parties there. He also said that he believed mandatory vaccinations will be put in place for the people of Germany and has seriously been considered. It should be in place by February or March of next year for Germany. He also noted that the Vice Chancellor will most likely become the new leader of the country. As you know, Angela Merkel steps down. Minister Hanna-Martin said in the Bahamas, mandatory vaccination is still very controversial, as vaccinations are a hard sell, and she doubts that we'll be on that road. We're going down anytime soon where it'll be mandatory. The German ambassador has been in the country for the past week. He congratulated Hanna-Martin on the acting position she's holding. In return, she spoke about strong leadership and said the Bahamas has a history of strong leadership that will continue. She also, the acting Prime Minister, held a courtesy call with a U.S. Coast Guard Admiral. They paid a courtesy call with the acting Prime Minister yesterday, as a relation between the 2 countries are a top priority on the government's agenda. Rear Admiral Brendan McPherson, the commander of the 7th Coastal Guard District and U.S. Charge of Affairs Usha Pitts, expressed how their agreement with the Bahamas remains the strongest and most effective among some 34 nations where they have agreements. Minister Hanna-Martin, acting Prime Minister, noted that while the relationship between both countries is strong, there are some major concerns of the Bahamas which will require continued collaborative efforts to bring relief to areas such as human, drug, and weapon trafficking. The Bahamas signed an air traffic agreement, as you're aware, as well with Germany. I forgot to mention that in my Germany update, to bring more airlift. Hopefully it will translate to more airlift, as it did in Jamaica, where Condor Airlines flies directly there from Germany, and they're hoping that happens. The acting Prime Minister also asked for support with Germany for technical and vocational learning to assist with that. As you would have been aware, Prime Minister attended Barbados' transition to republic. Prime Minister Philip Davis visited the island nation with a delegation including Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell and Her Excellency Leah Miller-Bryce, who is the ambassador to CARICOM. Prime Minister also, in his trek in South Florida, is looking to boost opportunities for Bahamian artists. Following his stay, as I would have said, in Barbados, he headed to Florida, where he met with Bahamians living abroad and had several private meetings. One of those meetings was with Bahamian artist Tavares Strawn, whose work is being exhibited at this year's Art Basel, Miami Beach. The creative hosted the Prime Minister Davis to a special tour featuring his work entitled Red, Gold, and Green. Prime Minister Davis is also meeting with art investors to create further opportunities for the Bahamas. The Prime Minister committed to the advancement and promotion of cultural talents on the national and international stage and promised greater development in the area of cultural art export. All right, those are a few of the announcements. Before we get any additional questions you have, I want to invite Cleopatra Christie to the podium, Dr. Cleopatra Christie, who is the administrator for the Crisis Center, to just briefly explain the importance. White Ribbon Day would have been on Monday, and you would have seen people wearing the white ribbons, and it's a strong message you want to send. I'm going to invite her just briefly to just address you on White Ribbon Day before we conclude.
Good morning. I am the administrator at the Bahamas Women's Crisis Center, and the Crisis Center was founded in 1982, and Dr. Sandra Dean Patterson is our director. It's a nonprofit organization, and it was created to provide intervention, prevention, and advocacy to women and children who experience domestic and sexual abuse. It's primarily run through the efforts of volunteers. The Crisis Center has been acknowledged nationally and internationally. And as Mr. Watson said, we celebrated the White Ribbon Campaign on Monday, the 29th of November. We thought it important to involve men in the work of this gender-based violence, which took the form of the White Ribbon Campaign, and we partnered with Rotary. The White Ribbon Campaign was inspired by a Montreal massacre that occurred sometime in 1991, where 14 women were murdered at a Montreal university, 13 were students, and 1 was an employee. The White Ribbon Campaign was started by a group of men in London, Ontario, Canada, in commemoration of this Montreal massacre, working to end violence against women and children. It's a male-led campaign, and that's why we partnered with Rotary. Men add their voices to this cry, and that cry is not to remain silent about male violence. This is a cry for action and change of behaviors. This is a cry to educate and to bring awareness to the issue of male violence. Men listen to men when this message is spoken by men. So we're calling on all men everywhere throughout the Bahamas, police officers, bus drivers, mechanics, salespersons, lawyers, all the professions, to embrace the values of this White Ribbon Campaign. And the message is, this violence is unacceptable and it would not be tolerated. So we invited men to make a declaration on Monday this week. And that declaration is, we will stand up, speak out, and act to end male violence against women and children. So we urge all men to make this commitment never to remain silent about violence against women and children. So the campaign encouraged men and boys to wear white ribbons, and that's why you saw us down in the square on Monday pinning the white ribbons on the members of parliament as they arrived. So I urge you, stand up, speak out, and act to end violence against women and children. Thank you.
Thank you. We thought it important to provide that forum today because we stand with the Women's Crisis Center. On Monday, Prime Minister, before leaving, would have met with the committee and would have pledged his support in speaking out and standing up against violence against women and children. And we know that there are some men who are victims as well. And so we stand to end this kind of violence against humanity. All right, that concludes. Are there any questions that weren't addressed during the press conference today that you would still like to get answered? We can still go through that. I didn't have my list with the names. Do I have my list with the names so that we can go through it? But just anybody have any other additional questions you want to get answered?
I mean, travel restrictions, we announced some for Africa, but now we're seeing this new variant is not only in Africa, will travel restrictions be considered for European nations and North American countries as well?
Good question. I spoke to the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Michael Darville, this morning regarding it. They're watching things. Right now, there's not a need for it, but they're watching it. He spoke with PAHO. PAHO is not recommending it based on what the initial reports are. As you heard, Dr. Nakia Forbes said they're still waiting on more research. Right now, there's not a need to add any additional measures in place, but they're watching it, and if there is a need to do so, they will do so. But right now, no.
Do we believe that the emergence of this new variant will impact the reopening of in-person school in January?
We're watching that. Minister of Education, Gladys Hanna Martin, has been meeting with her team as they prepare for the reopening of school. Let me explain what's going to happen. It's not going to be out in January, schools open, everybody attends. It's going to be in a hybrid model. Which means that you will go on certain days, certain students. So all of the students will not return the same time and on the same day together. They will be in staggered moments. So some will still be online while some are in face-to-face. But they're watching before that time, which is supposed to be, I think, the 13th of January. They're watching and to see how things develop. And if there's a need to put further restriction in place, it will be done. But so far, there's still a push and a go for the hybrid model for the reopening of schools. Anybody else? Y'all are kind today. Kyle, you're quiet. Oh, good. That's a good thing. All right. So we want to end our press conference as we do, highlighting small businesses, food businesses. And today we're highlighting Addiction, the Outrageous Bakery. Interesting. We got some sweet delights for you. The owner of that is Betty Bethel. Where are you? That's you. Come on up. Come on up, Betty, and just tell us a little bit about your business and what you do and what we can expect today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Betty Bethel. I'm the proud owner of Addiction. I specialize in custom cakes, cupcakes, you name it, we do it. Little backstory about Addiction. I started Addiction when I was 14. I'm now 23. It's been a long, long journey. I'm very thankful. But I'm here to announce my milestone. December 20th, I will be opening my retail storefront. It's located in the Fox Hill community. You could follow me on my Instagram page at Addiction Bahamas. Keep up with all the updates. But thank you for having me. And I have some treats in the back. Hope you guys enjoy. I love feedback.
Tell them how they can reach you, telephone contact.
Oh, and my telephone contact is 426-4441. WhatsApp is better. But thank you.
And for orders only, please. Thank you, and
you.
congratulations to you. And so we have some delightful treats in the back, and those of you who are counting your calories, go to the table to the right, and there's something a little more appropriate for you there. But thank you so much. I know today was heavy with information, but I appreciate you coming every week after week and being a part. However else we can help you, please feel free. That ends our press briefing for this week. Happy holidays to all of you. Thank you.